Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore. It's time for another whiskey tasting. And today, headed to Ireland and a brand you may or may not have heard of called DUNVILLE'S. And DUNVILLE'S is a historic brand that when all of the Irish distilleries were starting to shut down because Prohibition had killed them off, the Scots with their blended whiskey was basically, that was taking over the globe, and you had Prohibition come in the U.S., and all of a sudden Irish whiskey, which had been sold mostly in barrels, was being doctored, or things were being put out there that were called Irish whiskey that weren't, and it really hurt the industry. So many of the distilleries went under. A few of them survived, say Paddy, Powers, those brands hung around, but sooner or later they were all absorbed by Irish Distillers Limited, who owned the Jameson brand, the Spots, Redbreast, all of that, and eventually got control of Bushmills as well. So there was only one company that was over all of the Irish brands back in the 70s. So you had that situation happen and all these distilleries going out of business, but DUNVILLE'S was the only one that was really profitable, that could have held out, but for some reason, I think it was 1940s, they just said, okay, we've had enough, and we're out. We're not going on any further. So it's an interesting brand for the Echlinville Distillery to pick up and try to bring back. And what they've done, since they are sourcing this whiskey, is they are trying to elevate the sourced whiskey by doing finishing. And so this particular single malt Irish whiskey came from Cooley, somewhere between 8 and 15 years old by the time it got to DUNVILLE'S, or to Echlinville. And then from there, they would finish it in a different type of cask. So this is a PALO CORTADO sherry cask finish. This is cask number 1613. It is 55.5% alcohol by volume and aged 21 years in total. Now, if you're not familiar with PALO CORTADO sherry, I wasn't very familiar with it either, because I will readily admit I am not a sherry connoisseur, but apparently there's some mythology around this particular spirit, in that they say that it doesn't actually, it's not something you can make, it's something that just happens. And it's become popular, and because it's become popular, there's some fear that it might go extinct at some point because it won't be able to be made anymore. Now, the character of this particular sherry falls somewhere between Oloroso sherry and Amontillado. Now, I've had Amontillado, very nutty, almost almond-like to me, and dry. And then Oloroso, of course, you get your dark fruits, all those kinds of notes coming out of Oloroso. So the idea is that the nose is going to probably be more of the Amontillado. The palate is going to be more of the Oloroso sherry. So this has rested. For those who know that I like to let a whiskey set in the glass for a minute for every year. Yes, this has been in this glass for over 21 minutes, so should be good and ready to nose this. And DUNVILLE'S, my experience when tasting on site and getting a chance to taste a 12-year-old and a 21-year-old in a PX, was that these were, especially once you got to 21 years old, so well cared for that I would put them, the ones that I had there, above GlenDronach, which is my favorite Speyside whiskey. And I say that with the older ages. The younger ages, probably not so much, but the 21-year-old GlenDronach to me is a slightly, it's too subtle for me. It gets a little bit too subtle for me. And I was amazed at that PX cask 21-year-old from DUNVILLE'S was just very flavorful and full of different fruit notes on the nose. And so, like I say, I was very impressed by that. So we're going to see how this does. And you're asking me, is this something that is available for you to purchase? Well, sometimes I do these reviews more to give you an idea of what's coming and just to show you a quality range, because this is going to be a very hard bottle for you to bump into, and it's probably going to set you back over €300, $300 up from there. So it's not a cheap whiskey by any sense of the imagination. And now you know why I brought it back with me, because I only brought back a few of my samples that I got on my trip to Ireland, and these were sealed, and I felt like, okay, I can get these back without too much trouble. And so again, the experience with this is that the nose is really quite substantial on this whiskey. I don't have to get very far away, and I can really start picking up some of that. There's an apricot note in here, kind of tropical fruits coming through on it. And it's got some really nice spices, nutmeg, little cinnamon, some clove in there. The thing about this is that sometimes whiskeys are really hard for me to, I'll just give like a generic baking spice, but these are so well defined on the nose that it's very apparent what they are. In fact, I almost feel like I'm smelling a baked good rather than actually smelling a whiskey at this moment. Except for the fact that I don't think I've had a baked good with apricots and mango before, but I am pulling some of that in. Now, when I first poured this in the glass, I did go over and nose it just to kind of get a sense of things. And when it first got in the glass, it was very musty, and it had a lot of leather and tobacco notes to it. But letting it set in the glass over time, all of a sudden, all the fruits started coming out on this particular whiskey. Cheers. A lot of those dark fruits come in, figs, dates. There is a bite, kind of like a peppery bite or ginger bite that comes in as you're continuing to process it, as it's going down towards the finish. A little caramel note in there, so I'm assuming that a lot of that time, that 8 to 12 years, has been spent in American bourbon barrels before it makes its way over here. But it really is this sherry that is having a major influence on this particular spirit. Once it's done, there's a nice warmth to it. I almost want to say it's a Kentucky hug coming from Ireland. Spices coming in there still on the finish. Just a lot of stuff going on in this particular whiskey. And something else I was getting on the nose early on was kind of a menthol. Ooh, now I'm getting a chocolate and raisin note out of it. Wow. This sucker is evolving in the glass. That is impressive. Okay, I'm going to follow up on my buddies. You don't know what you're doing. You're supposed to put some water in to open it up. I'm not going to put much in. This is really good all on its own. Let's see if that changes it at all. Maybe a little orange note comes out of there too. I don't think the water helped it. The menthol now is starting to pop back out again. I want to say, if anything, it actually, it brought more of the baked goods out, and it's kind of tamped back on the apricot and mango. The caramel is more present. Oh, what is that? Okay, orange rind coming in. Almost like the orange has elevated now. And then as it lays on the palate, that warmth is still there. You get a little more of a tobacco-y, slightly bitter, tannin-y kind of thing coming through, but just very lightly. That's very interesting. I would, next time I drink it, I won't be adding any water to it, because I think it was good just the way it was. But interesting to see the evolution of it, at least anyway. Oh, this is one of those whiskeys that, like Springbank 12 cask strength, I probably could keep my nose in the glass for quite a long time, because it's got some really, really pleasant. I'm getting Christmas cake now. On the finish, I'm now starting to translate Christmas cake, as the English and the Irish and Scottish say, to fruit cake in a way. It kind of has that fruit cake kind of a flavor to it. So really, really interesting. And as I say, I think keep your eye on Irish whiskey. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff coming out. And if you're looking for that stuff that is going to impress you as a single malt fan, especially a Speyside single malt fan, keep your eye on DUNVILLE'S, because they are doing some really amazing stuff with those casks, and they're keeping things very flavor rich, which I like that. Too long in the cask, it becomes too oak influenced to me, and I start losing interest in it. And that's what happened with the GlenDronachs once it got to 29 years. I was better at the 28, 27 years. But still, that oak influence was there. 21 years, less oak influence, but the whole flavor profile seemed to be lighter, which made me crave going back to the 18-year or the 15 or 12-year to get more of a flavor burst out of it. Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. What do you think? Are you ready and interested in trying Irish whiskey? I will continue to mix up and throw in some whiskeys. Maybe you'll be able to get, and some maybe you won't be able to get. That's going to happen. But usually there's a little history lesson along with it, or some kind of information to help instruct, what is going on with barrel finishing and that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks everybody. By the way, up to 800 subscribers, and I really appreciate each and every one of you for joining the channel. And thank you so much. Cheers and Slainte. That is an excellent whiskey. Oh man, the baking spices on the end is so robust. It is amazing how robust this whiskey is at 21 years. It really, really is. I have to say, I was watching a video. You've probably seen it too if you're on Twitter at all. It was Charles McLean and someone else, and they were both talking about this old whiskey they were tasting of like 30, 40 years, and it just seemed like they were reaching for compliments for it. What can we say nice about this very woody liquid? And so, yeah, it's these older whiskeys can be a challenge, that is for sure. But man, when they're done right, that one is excellent.